Back in the early 90s, a male friend, Scott, invited my girlfriend and I to Sandy Pond Beach to go boating with him and his friends. He was already camped there, so gave us instructions that once we got there, we should check in with Nick, the marina owner, and ask him to boat us over to his nearby site. We drove up that afternoon, but once we got to the marina, found that Nick wasn't there. While waiting for him to return, we happened upon a charming young guy having breakfast in the marina restaurant and started chatting with him. I've forgotten his name, so I'll call him Bob. When we explained we were waiting for a ride to the beach, Bob readily offered to take us there. It was just a short jaunt, so we agreed and proceeded to follow him down to the dock, jumped into his snazzy new boat. My friend eyed a handgun lying in the hold up front and remarked that the holster looked just like the one on her brother's sheriff department service revolver. Bob related the fact that he was a Pennsylvania police officer, flashed us his badge. He told us he was off duty for the weekend and was there to spend the weekend at his aunt's camp. He then suggested that we swing over to his camp to pick up some river tubes so we could all go tubing once we met up with our friends. Sure, sounds like fun. We arrived at his aunt's very picturesque camp and waited in the boat while he loaded the tubes on the back, then took off to meet Scott and the gang. Shortly found them and joined their bevy of boats queued up along the beach. Introduced Bob all around, and everybody seemed to enjoy his company. They liked him even more when he was preparing to leave and told us we could keep the 2 river tubes. A gift, he said. They were spares and he didn't need them. We all thought his generosity a bit odd, but off he drove, leaving the tubes. We spent a couple more hours tubing, then boated back to the marina, to our car, and started driving home. Naturally, we had the car radio playing as we chattered about what a fun day it had been. Suddenly, our music was interrupted by a local news bulletin notifying us that an APB was being put out for a suspected cop killer. The reporter stated that the day prior, a Pennsylvania police officer had pulled over and was in the process of apprehending a suspect driving a stolen SUV. The officer was later found on the side of the road, shot dead with his own service revolver. The suspect reportedly then traveled to Sandy Pond Beach, where he holed up in a camp overnight. The camp's owner was away at the time of the incident, but upon his return, phoned the police to report that his camp had been burglarized and the boat left in disarray. The news bulletin continued, Sandy Pond police officers have just spotted the stolen SUV and are currently in pursuit. Local residents should be on alert because suspect is considered armed and dangerous. I live in the northeastern part of Texas. If you know anything about the Lone Star State, it's that we get some of the craziest weather in the country. Tornadoes, heat waves, Arctic blasts, hurricanes, snow, you name it, we've got it. Some time ago, we were in the midst of an epic string of storms. Some monster supercells developed and made their way over to my neck of the woods. I was home alone with my cat that night. Now, I'm not afraid of storms, but if you've ever been through a serious weather event, you know that it's something to be taken seriously. Henry the cat was sleeping peacefully in his giant cat bed while I tried to find something interesting on the TV to no avail. All of a sudden, Henry jumped out of his bed and onto my bed. I thought maybe he was spooked by some crashing thunder, which is actually weird in his case. He's literally slept through a hurricane that blew a giant bench into my door, so I tried to tell him it was okay and placate him. His cries grew louder and more worrisome. I love my cat with all my heart. I felt terrible to see him getting so stressed. Suddenly, like a bat out of hell, Henry leapt up and darted out of my room. He's never done this before, so I followed closely behind him. Then I heard it. I thought it was a gunshot or a crash of thunder by close-by lightning. The bang was that loud. I made it back to my room where I saw a hole in my ceiling. Rain was pouring through, and on my pillow, right where I was just seconds before, a massive hailstone now laid. It was larger than my hand, and it was heavy. Henry now trotted back into my room like everything was fine and rubbed up against my leg. I gave him extra treats that night. I was driving a moving truck and had driven my route before and really knew it. Strangely took an exit I didn't need, and this was in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, so the exits weren't like all over the place, or the road wasn't confusing, and ended up having to drive through some stupid rinky-dink town. But there was a tornado that dug up some of the interstate I should have been on that I missed. Now it's time to find out which of our stories were true and which were false. Our first story, in which people visited down to Sandy Pond Beach and actually spent the day with a cop killer, was in fact true. Our second story, in which a hailstone crashed through the ceiling, narrowly missing somebody's head, that's actually false. And our last story, where someone took the exit off of the interstate and unintentionally missed being hit by a tornado, is in fact true. Thank you for making it to the end of my first YouTube show. If you'd like to have your stories illustrated and narrated, you can submit an email to the link provided in the channel description. Thank you for your time.